right, so hello and welcome to our webinar entitled Staying Safe Online, Combating Cyber Risks with Open Source Intelligence. This is brought to you by Northwest's Financial Wellness Series, and this webinar is being recorded. My name is Denise Kitchen, your host, and I'm one of the relationship managers of the company partnership program. Our department manages the partnerships the credit union has with organizations so that they can offer credit union membership as part of their benefits package to their employees, members, and volunteers. And OSINT, the organization where Jessica is from, happens to be one of the organizations that we're partnered with. So we're super lucky to have her on board today. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. Secondly, I'd like to go over some housekeeping items. Everyone is muted, and we ask that you hold your questions until the end of the presentation when we get to the Q&A session. And you can type in your questions by using the chat feature, which you should be able to find right on the bottom of your screen. For any questions that we don't get to address, Jessica will actually list her address at the end, and you can pose your questions to her via email. So without further ado, oh, and of course, we will be raffling off, I almost forgot to mention this, a $25 Visa gift card. After our Q&A session, we'll have a raffle question. But now, without further ado, let me introduce the wonderful Jessica Stutzman. She's from Open Source Intelligence, and she's an open source investigations expert. Jessica, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for doing this with me today. Go ahead and take it away.
Fantastic. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. So I'm on screen here for just a minute. We do have a number of attendees, and sometimes my internet can be a little wacky. So I will turn my camera off here in just a second, and we'll just kind of go to a verbal and walking through our slides. First, I'd like to just thank the Northwest Federal Credit Union for their partnership and their support for the OSINT Foundation. Their commitment to their community has been really evident for us through their very generous sponsorship and support of the OSINT Foundation, from helping us host events like this to actually hosting physical events in some of their spaces and allowing our members a place in their credit union, which is very, very exciting for us. If you're not familiar with the OSINT Foundation, we are a nonprofit organization that's focused on lessening the burdens of government when it comes to open source intelligence work, as far as governance. And we are serving as an association for the U.S. intelligence community of OSINT practitioners. And we're hoping to be a really great educational resource for the public as well. So that is what we're doing here today. This is going to be our first partnered webinar as part of our endeavor to highlight and help everybody be a little bit more secure from a collective standpoint and be safer in the digital space that we're all sharing today. So I am going to go ahead and get my camera turned off here, and then we'll kind of jump into our presentation. There we go. Perfect. Okay, there we go. So our talk today, Staying Safe Online, Combating Cyber Risks with Open Source Intelligence, is more than just a presentation here. We're hoping that this is the beginning of a really detailed conversation about getting through the internet, navigating all of the different complexities safely and intelligently, so you can help protect yourself, your children, your family members, employees, coworkers, anybody that you know. We're going to be covering today what open source intelligence actually is and how it's used. We're going to try to demystify that a little bit and explore its role in everyday online interactions. Even if you're not part of the intelligence community, you will leave today understanding how this applies to you. You will highlight some common online threats that target both individuals and organizations, and we'll discuss some risk mitigation strategies to give you the knowledge you need to protect yourself and your information. We'll leave you guys today with a list of resources that you can use and some more places you can go to learn about some of this type of stuff and help you stay safer online. So together with the support of the Northwest Federal Credit Union and with the OSINT Foundation, we're here to try to empower you to harness the power of using open source kind of tips, tricks, and techniques to stay safer online. So thank you all for your attendance. We are so excited to have you here. We're excited to kind of engage with you afterwards as well. And we're going to jump right into our presentation. As Denise did say, we do have the chat available. There's also a Q&A section that I can see. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in. We'll go ahead and get to those at the end. And for those that we do not get to, I will have some exciting news for you afterwards. There we go. Okay, so what is open source intelligence? It is intelligence or information that's been produced from publicly available information, collected, exploited, disseminated in a timely manner for an audience for the purpose of addressing a specific intelligence requirement. If you're like, wow, that's dry, it's because it is. That is the public law definition of open source intelligence. That is what the OSINT Foundation uses as the basis for doing their work. Now, that doesn't tell you much about how this actually applies to your life and what this means for you. So with that definition, it's clear that it can be a very powerful tool since it's being used for intelligence purposes, turning things just from the internet or from open sources into information that's actionable for government intelligence solutions. So going from there, we can pivot and explore how OSINT gets used in a bunch of different sectors. It's one thing to have a ton of data and information, but it's another to actually navigate through it and gather pertinent information from cybersecurity experts using it to identify financial threats or look at market trends. There are just so many applications of this. So we're going to bridge the gap between how we take intelligence, that's geared towards people doing things for the government, and actually talk about how that impacts your everyday life. So even if you don't work in intelligence or in finance, but OSINT will have a profound impact on the security of your personal data, maybe job stability, depending on some of the threats we'll talk about today, and even the integrity of some of the processes that happen in our societies. So understanding OSINT is not just for analysts and people that are, strategic in this environment. It's crucial for anybody that's on the internet using things daily. If you're a bank customer, if you are somebody that uses applications on your phone, this all will end up being applicable to you. So first, we'll take a look at some ways that it's used, both from a government perspective and in just the open online environment, and then we'll move into taking a look at some of the threats we see. So the screenshot you see here in the background showing investigations, disinformation, documentation, and publications is from a site called OSINT for Ukraine. It's actually a community initiative of folks that have been documenting the war in Ukraine. This is a great example of how OSINT is used, not necessarily by government entities, but by general public and general population. They've been using this type of platform and these type of research concepts to get situational awareness by reporting locations maybe of where Russian units are and documenting war crimes. The same type of activities are going on in Gaza and in Iraq. They're even looking at historical incidents in Iraq to identify ISIS and ISIL members. I look at their true identities, find additional criminal activities, and engage in the prosecution process. There's also people that use this for cybercrime investigations. So a lot of the threats we'll talk about today are cyber crimes, and we could use OSINT methodologies to identify those criminals and identify crime victims once we find the criminal networks that are engaging in these activities. People also use this for background checks and identity research. So if you have a security clearance for work, there's a good chance that your data, things like your social media platforms, have been looked at for their information to kind of get a better assessment for your security clearance. Sometimes people are also using this stuff for blackmail and for other negative and nefarious purposes. But these are just some of the ways that OSINT can be used. And if it's starting to kind of make sense that like, okay, I could see how, for background checks and protecting my identity, how this would be relevant. That's fantastic. And we'll talk more about the different kind of ways that you personally could be impacted by some of these threats. And we'll talk about the OSINT methods you can use and some of the defensive techniques that we employ in open source intelligence to protect ourselves. And they apply to everybody that's using digital devices. So there's a huge global impact on cyber threats and cyber crime. As we could see here, there are 9 million cases of identity theft reported every year. If you consider that the most recent US Census had somewhere around 332 million people in the United States living as citizens, that would be only 36 years that it would take at current theft, statistics for the identity of every single person in the United States to be compromised. That is huge. That's such a big number, and that number grows every year. We can protect ourselves from identity theft and from cyber threats by, again, using defensive techniques. There's a huge amount of financial implications to this. And if you are a member of Northwest Federal Credit Union, you might be here because you're interested in learning about the financial impact of these types of events and protecting yourself from falling victim to those. $17,000 every minute on average is lost to phishing attacks. Last year, there were estimates that the year would total out with over $8 trillion in financial losses from cyber threats, not just from phishing, but from things like hacking, ransomware, extortion, and sextortion crimes. And we'll talk about all of those as we move forward as well. There are also over 100,000 personal data breaches yearly. That's not counting corporate data breaches like ones that you may see with Discord or when Facebook was breached several years ago. So this happens all the time, and there are ways that we can make us less likely to be victims. Beyond the financial losses that we're seeing here, there are a ton of additional risks that include your personal safety, harm to your reputation, emotional distress, especially in the cases of things like sextortion and maybe dating and romance scams. We see also, if we're looking at the data here, this is from Statista. They published this recently this year. We do not have hard numbers for 2023 yet, but they are projecting that this number goes up every year of how many dollars are lost and taken from victims of cyber crimes. So going through 2028, they're expecting this to go up to $13.82 trillion. It's US dollars in cyber crimes being taken from people at different levels of victims. The ones that we will talk about today are going to be hacking, phishing, ransomware, online stalking, and doxing. So this matters for you. This is not just numbers and not just statistics. These are real risks to your personal and financial well-being. They're also not confined to the digital realm, but these can have tangible impacts to your real life. There's been so many instances of people getting taken as victims and losing everything that they own, their entire life savings, their entire bank accounts, losing their identities, not being able to purchase a house, maybe even 10, 15 years later after events like this. So understanding and mitigating these risks are essential for us to protect not just our assets, but our identities, our personal safety, and our family members. So the first thing that we're going to talk about today is hacking. And I'm sure you're all familiar with things like hacking. You hear it all the time. You probably see your friends online going, oh no, don't answer any requests from my Facebook account. I was hacked. This is something that's super common, and it's not just on Facebook, it's everywhere. So hacking overall is the unauthorized access and manipulation of computer systems, networks, or data. This is usually happening to steal sensitive information, disrupt operations if it's a company or a business or a government, or exploit system vulnerabilities for other malicious purposes. Oftentimes when we're looking at corporate entities and businesses, the hacking is the first part of a much larger attack that can turn into things like ransomware or phishing and gaining additional credentials. Stephanie, I see your question. There will be a Q&A period at the end, but if you have a question right now, please drop it in the chat and I will go in order through the chat and we'll go back and answer them. We definitely want to make sure if there's something pops into mind right now, we want to make sure you can throw that in there and we'll get to it later. So again, common targets for hacking are going to be things like corporations and businesses. They have a ton of valuable information and intellectual property. Government agencies are huge targets because they have access to such sensitive information. That could also be something related to the espionage process. And then people with high net worths, right? If everybody's looking just to find that money pit, they're going to look for those individuals that have really high net worths and try to target them for financial gain. So if we're trying to protect ourselves against hacking, there's a number of things that we would implement. And these are, again, OSINT tips and tricks that we would use to protect ourselves during our investigations, but also to protect our entities and our partners from having these types of things occur. The first and foremost thing is hacking. Because it is unauthorized access to your accounts or your systems, it is going to be more important than ever to embrace a strong password. Complex passwords should be difficult to guess. They should have numbers, letters, symbols, and they should be unique. You should not be using the same password across multiple sites. You can use a password manager to help you keep track of those really securely. I spoke to a legal organization not too long ago, and somebody asked me, hey, I use different passwords for everything and they're all really long, but I keep them all in a legal notepad. And I just write them all down. How can I be safer? And I was like, honestly, keeping it offline like that and not storing it in your browser, that is one of the safest things you can do unless that paper gets wet or catches on fire. So that's really, really smart. But of course, just be cautious to not lose your passwords wherever you're keeping them. Online password managers are usually very reputable. Do your research before you look into those. We would be happy to make some recommendations at the end. But also keep in mind that even password management companies have been breached. So just be cautious there. Using two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication, another huge way to protect yourself there. And these are going to apply to almost all of the types of criminal activities we're talking about today. These techniques can be used across all of these and should be implemented The more things we can do to protect ourselves, the better. So two-factor authentication, that's when you add extra security to your accounts, whether you log in with an email address and then have a phone number that is connected and it sends you that 6-digit code. The 6-digit code, it almost always says something to the effect of, do not share this code with anybody. And for the love of God, do not share that code with anybody. There was a very interesting scam. Actually, my parents were almost victim to this. Thankfully, my mother, she knows now to just call me when something seems weird. So we'll talk about that as well. Think critically here. She had been listing something on Facebook Marketplace to sell, and she got a message from somebody saying, hey, I want to buy this from you, but I want to make sure you're not scamming me. I sent a code to your phone. Can you go ahead and send me that code so I can verify that it's actually you? And I was like, wow, they turned that around on her. That is genius. This stuff evolves all the time. So folks, keep those codes secure, especially when they're coming by phone or by email. And if you get a code that you were not expecting or not prompting for, delete it and then go ahead and double check that account. Maybe consider changing your password on the account that code came for, because there's a good chance that somebody's trying to access that and that a minimum may have your password already. Also, keep your operating systems updated regularly, security patches and things like that. Oh, we haven't switched slides yet. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of talking through stuff, Denise. Um, Be skeptical of those emails and keep your network secured. You can also back up your data, and we'll talk about these more again as we move through the presentation. Okay, so you folks should see a new slide now. So since we're talking about things like Facebook hacking, how does this happen? A lot of the times this can happen through things like phishing attempts. So continuing on with our mission to help kind of safeguard our digital lives and our digital identities, phishing is a deceptive attempt by people to trick you into giving up your information. It could be personal information, things like passwords, things like credit card information, by pretending that they're actually a trustworthy entity online in the digital space. People that are targets of this type of activity are often people that are maybe not as tech savvy, or people in organizations without really strong security protocols. If your organization has the report phishing button, I'm sure that your independent organization has sent out test phishing emails where they, tell you, oh, click on this link for new annual security training or something like that. They intentionally bury hints in there to get you to try to realize that it's a fake, but you may not always catch it. There's no harm in falling victim to a test by your employer. They may make you take some additional training, but those are good practices to kind of get used to what those scams look like. So use that as a learning opportunity and don't be embarrassed, because people at every level fall for phishing attempts. And also people from financial institutions and people that are using online services. And we'll show an example of what this looks like here. This was a phishing email example from Bank of America. And this is an older example. We can see the date was 2014, but they still do this today. And this, we get these all the time. If you look through your junk mail in your email inboxes, you'll probably see stuff like this. I would not recommend going through and clicking on them and reading them. But if you want to get more familiar with what this stuff looks like and how this has evolved, it's a good way to kind of do it. Just again, be very cautious. These should just be deleted immediately. So don't kind of play around with them unless you're protecting yourself appropriately. But we can see here that the first thing that's suspicious is it says it's from Bank of America at the top, but the email address is a weird Comcast.net email address. So that is flag number 1 for us. We also see that it's not specifically to your email address, it's to undisclosed recipients. So that is being sent to multiple people. This is very, very common. You may see a list of random people that this is being sent to in addition to yourself, because this is much easier to send a blast out to 50 people than it is individually. It also saves the scammers a lot of time. You also see things like Dear Member. If it was member, it would be capitalized, but more often than anything, it's going to use your name if it's an authentic banking institution. You'll also see here, please sign into your account, and they're giving you a hyperlink. If we were to hover over that hyperlink, you would see that it actually directs you somewhere else. This is to a Bitly site. What this is redirecting you to a page that looks like Bank of America, where if you clicked on that link, you would think you were on their homepage. You would log in with your email address and your password, or whatever your username would be. And then that person who was phishing would have your credentials, be able to log into your actual bank account and steal your information and probably your money more than anything. So happens all the time. These are just some of the things we see here. We also see some grammatical errors. Oftentimes, a lot of these that are targeting folks in the US, they may not have English as their primary language. So if you see emails come in and the English is broken or there's no punctuation or things just don't necessarily make sense the way they're reading, that's another good indicator that this may be a scam. So we could use the techniques we talked about earlier to protect ourselves from these, but we also want to avoid on clicking unsolicited links. The best thing you can do in these types of situations is to identify the link. If it says it's Bank of America and you do in fact have a Bank of America account, go ahead and go to their website, type it in yourself into your own browser, or go to your app on your phone and log in and see if there's any suspicious activity. If there's not, then you can definitely confirm that this was a fake phishing attempt. If you're ever not sure, go to the primary institution that's claiming to reach out to you and double check with them. And that will be a big, big help. You can also report these to the banking institutions themselves. A lot of the times they will do investigations to identify potentially who these scammers are, or at least send emails out in large groups to their user base, letting them know of scams like this and what they may look like so you can avoid them. So the next one we'll talk about is ransomware. And that is, again, can be something that occurs by clicking those links. Maybe the Bank of America, in that email, maybe it wasn't trying to actually get access to my financial institution information. Maybe that's not what they're interested in. Maybe instead they want Bitcoin. They want something that is maybe a little bit harder to trace. So maybe when you click that link instead, it actually began a ransomware attack. Ransomware is a type of malicious software that's designed to block access to your computer system or to parts of data on your network until you make a certain amount of money that you pay to somebody. It typically spreads through those phishing emails or by exploiting other internal security vulnerabilities in your organization. A lot of the time, ransomware is targeting larger institutions. It's healthcare institutions because they have a lot of personal data that's very valuable on the internet. They have small and medium-sized businesses, maybe because they don't have as much funding or as many resources to have really strong digital and network security. It could also be things like local governments and educational institutions. We've seen a number of instances of that in the last few years. And things like critical infrastructure. So if you remember, back in May 2021, the Colonial Pipeline was targeted with a ransomware attack. We weren't sure at the time how vast that was, but their attack had actually blocked about 100 gigabytes of data from their network. For reference there was a foreign currency exchange in London called Travelex. They paid $2.3 million to get access to 5 gigabytes of data. So with the Colonial Pipeline, they were maybe being looked to spend 40 or $50 million to get access back to their data. Now, it's important to note that the first practice is not to pay the ransomware, right? The Treasury Department actually made ransomware Bitcoin payments illegal in the fall of, I believe, 2022 or 2021 after this incident. So if it had only encrypted their data, they would be down for a couple of days and they could restore their backups. But it looked like they didn't store and back up all of their information. So that made that a far more dangerous attack and incident for them. So we are going to switch slides in just a moment here and show an example of what a ransomware attack may look like on your computer screen. I'm going to just give you a trigger warning. There are no images, but there are, words and text describing different, inappropriate activities that the ransomware targeters are using to pretend to get you to pay this ransomware. So if that is sensitive for you, please look away and I will let you know when we change slides. So we are moving to that slide now. So we see here, it's usually going to flash up a screen that looks very, very official. A lot of the times they will pretend to be somebody like the FBI, the Department of Justice, or some other government organization that has the authority to put you in prison and put you in jail. They claim to scan your address, your files, your IP address, your computer, and that they have a whole bunch of violations they're going to accuse you of. And if you want to get your computer and your data back, you're going to have to pay in Bitcoin. So we can see here, they make all of these wild claims to the point of, I'm not going to read these out loud just in case anybody was, turning away from this. But they provide a Bitcoin address for you to send that money to, and then they claim they will give you keys to unlock your device. Really interesting. I've actually seen this where it's not a ransomware attack. It's just a really bad pop-up ad. And if you click into the pop-up ad, it will then take over your computer. So this can happen again. phishing attempts and things like that, and that you will not, slide did not advance. Okay, so lost my train of thought there. So keep your software up to date. Again, protect your computer. Try not to allow any security patches to go, uninstalled. Be wary of suspicious emails. Don't download suspicious files. Back up your data. One of the best things you can do is if somebody hits you with a ransomware attack and it is genuine, maybe it does not matter because you keep all your data backed up regularly and you're not going to lose anything, right? You haven't put any new files on your computer last time, or if you did, you've uploaded it to your cloud server already and you're good to go. So yeah, whatever. Take a screenshot, maybe report it to somebody, report it to an organization that deals with this sort of thing. Your local police department or, CISA, I believe, has a reporting infrastructure for stuff like this as well. But you could just not restart your computer, but wipe your computer and start over again, and you're not affected. So best case scenario, in the event this does happen, your data is backed up, it does not affect you, you are not paying the ransom, and you can just move on with your life. Oh, okay, there we go. So the next one we'll talk about is online stalking. This kind of leads into stalking and doxing and swatting. It's using the email or the internet, email or any type of electronic communication in order to harass either a person or a group. It can be anything from just low-level threats to identity theft, intentionally damaging people's reputation, or just a variety of other types of things. More people that are targeted for online stalking are people that are very public facing. They're out there, their internet footprint is very large. Victims maybe of domestic abuse or people in very contentious personal relationships that can be very, very difficult to deal with, and those types of physical relationships in person can transition to online when somebody tries to move away from them. And people that are just users of the internet. If you're on the internet, it's a possibility that you could be a victim of stalking should you attract the attention of the wrong person. This is a screenshot from a New York Times report that was reporting on the misuse of phone monitoring apps. So there are a number of apps that were originally intended to track your children that were being used to spy on people without their consent. So if you are a parent, I would advocate using some of these applications to help track your children and know what they're doing, know where they're going. But these have been misused. So things like KidGuard, mSpy, and Spyzy are all things that have the ability to do this to protect your children's safety, especially with their online activities, but have also been misused. So interesting article, interesting pictures, highlights cases of, there's obviously legal and ethical repercussions to things like this. I am advocating that if you are going to use things like this, it is only for the purposes of good, keeping your children safe, and no other nefarious purposes. If for some reason you see something related to these apps on your device and you did not install them, that would be a good indicator that you might need to take a look at your phone and who has had access to your phone, just to kind of protect yourself and make sure there's nothing odd going on. So if we want to really be safe and protect ourselves from online stalking, we want to maintain our privacy settings. So you can see here somebody's checking their Twitter account. Know what it looks like. I'm sorry, X account. This was Twitter when they did the screenshots. Know what those platforms are doing to protect you from a safety standpoint, right? How can you limit your safety, or how can you limit your security settings so that not everything you post is public? Maybe you don't want your entire Facebook history to be visible to everybody. So you would want to go ahead and just make sure your accounts are secure. Make sure that you're using unique passwords, two-factor authentication again, and know who your connections are. That's going to be really important. A lot of people are super interested in having like all these followers and all of these friends, but if you don't know somebody, there's no reason for them to connect with you, unless you are an influencer, in which case you have a whole bunch of other things to worry about, and we're not going to cover that today. Document and report anything. If somebody is harassing you, if you do feel like you're being stalked, start taking screenshots, start, trying to keep record of that and making notes of anything weird that occurs, because that's going to help you later down the line. And then know where your block and reporting features are in a lot of these apps. If you're a big Facebook user, if you're a big X user, know how to block people, know how to keep them off of your accounts, and know how to use those report buttons to send them to Facebook. Be detailed when you're putting your reports in. And that will help you kind of flag some of that content and flag some of that behavior, and hopefully, help yourselves and everybody else avoid, stalking, doxing, and further instances of these types of activities. So if we go from stalking online, where we're more on the internet atmosphere, that can lead to something called doxing. Doxing is the act of publicly releasing private information about an individual or an organization. Usually, it's always without consent, right? To harass and intimidate or find ways to target those individuals. This happens a lot with journalists, media figures, political figures, people that are involved in disputes online. Um, if you've ever seen something called swatting, that is something that's kind of happened, and it's the next step of doxing. So doxing is the act of revealing that private personal information about somebody online without their consent. So we'll remember that because that's important. But that information can include things like names, home addresses, phone numbers, and personal records. So swatting takes that to the next level, where they actually falsely report an emergency at somebody's house, and they say, hey, there's somebody in this house holding another person at gunpoint. That sends a SWAT team to that person's house. And there have been instances in the last 2 years of individual civilians being killed by police officers because they were given a false report, came with a SWAT team, and the person was just very unsuspecting, had no idea. And, that's obviously a terrible situation for everybody. So this is an example of what something like that might look like. This is obviously fake information because we don't want to dox anybody, especially for an example like this. But this is kind of how this would go. Somebody would provide an ID or some type of information for an individual, provide their address, and take that and use that to target this person in the real world. So it's very, very dangerous. This happens a lot with big public events as well. To protect yourself against this, again, everything we've talked about so far, but also make sure that you're not sharing this type of data online. If you do have an instance where your identity's been stolen, work with the appropriate authorities and the appropriate organizations to remove that data so you don't have to worry about this. Educate your friends and family. If you don't want them to post your personal information, let them know. If they're tagging you without your consent, tell them that you don't want to be tagged in certain types of things. You don't want to be seen in pictures of your home to be on the internet and things like that. And just kind of limit your information. You can also use privacy tools. There's a lot of ways you can protect your online histories and things like that. VPNs, privacy browsers, email services that aren't, tracking you and things of that nature. And then just know that you have legal options here. Your state, all the laws are going to be different depending on where you live, but you do have legal recourse to be protected against doxing, to be protected against stalking, and things of that nature. So just know, again, all of these are crimes. These are criminal activities, and you do have the opportunity to report these to law enforcement and protect yourself. So speaking of, crimes and protecting yourselves, we will talk briefly about sextortion. We'll talk about just kind of the general way that this happens. So this is when somebody threatens to distribute private or sensitive material. If you're not providing somebody with either, usually it's that you provide them with an inappropriate image and then they demand, money in exchange for not releasing that information. But it could be that they're also, you sent them one and they're trying to get you to provide additional ones by, attempting to release that information. The most common targets for this are teenagers and young adults, people that are using dating apps or on dating websites, and public figures. Just because of the nature of their engagement with online, it would be very publicly embarrassing for them to have these sorts of pictures online. So always be cautious with what personal content you're sharing, right? OnlyFans has gotten huge, and those people understand very much what they're doing. That is a risk that they're taking. But that's something that could be used in a sextortion case at some point. Use strong digital security. If you do have inappropriate imagery or content, protect it. I'm not going to tell you not to do that. That is on you, whatever you do in your home and with your devices, but protect it. Encrypt that data. Use two-factor authentication if you're storing it in like a cloud environment. And be aware that this is a crime. Sextortion is a crime. You have the ability to report this to law enforcement. Although it may be embarrassing, that is the best thing you can do. Don't give in to any threats. If you're being targeted, don't comply with those demands. Reach out to law enforcement agencies. Preserve your evidence. Save all communications that you have. Take screenshots and report that again. And the sooner you get to work on reporting this when it happens, the sooner that this can get resolved, and you will not have to be, abused or taken advantage of further. So because children are, and teenagers, young adults are often the targets of this, we want to highlight again how important it is to, protect children from these types of things. So the first thing is, if you have children, if you work with children, just express to them the fact that the internet is really, really difficult to take things off of. If it gets out there, it almost never can be removed. Um, Try to have an open environment with your children to talk about these things. That way, if something like this does occur, they will be comfortable coming to you. Talk to them about the risks that exist. Teach them to think critically, right? If there's somebody that they've never met, proclaiming to maybe be in love with them and want inappropriate pictures, make sure that they understand that that's a weird thing to occur. And also just have those conversations about maybe not sharing that type of private information and private imagery. That's really, really useful. Educating your children on safe relationships online, knowing what a healthy relationship is versus an unhealthy relationship, putting pressure on people to make demands about sending type of content and imagery is not going to be safe and healthy. And if you don't teach this to your children, they may not understand that. And then just try to make sure that you can recognize and report instances of this if you see it, recognize what those activities may look like, or what the you know signs and indicators are of those happening. And we'll give you guys some resources at the end for trying to protect children from these types of activities. So we've talked about a lot of risk mitigation strategies, and we're going to kind of highlight some of these again. Be aware of your digital footprint. Everything that we do online leaves a trace, leaves a footprint that can be permanent. So be really careful about what information you're sharing, because once it's out there, you can't take it back. Think critically when you're on the internet. Look at everything a little bit skeptically. Not everything that you read online is going to be true. There are a lot of scams that are cloaked in a little bit of legitimacy, right? We saw the Bank of America scam. You could think that the bank's just trying to help you, but unfortunately, it's not valid. So question the source of your information, question the source of your emails and these random text messages that are coming in, and verify it through different channels. Browse safely, right? Use maybe privacy focused search engines, browser extensions that can block trackers and things like that. You could think about using VPNs to help protect your online, your IP address and things like that. It's also, again, we said software updates. Make sure you're keeping your software up to date. Make sure that if your computer says, hey, we have a software update for you, you're not ignoring it for 6 months and falling, that far behind. They put these updates out because it is going to help you be more secure and protect yourself. Use two and multi-factor authentication. Again, sending those codes to yourself, making sure that even if somebody gets your password, they can't access your account because they would have to have that code as well. Keep an eye on your privacy settings, making sure that you know what information is public and what is private, because there are no current laws in place for the federal government that says what you can do and can't do with private information on the internet. There are a lot of arguments about that, and there's some legislation that's pending. But if your information is private today, but it was public yesterday, and I saw it yesterday, I can use that because it was accessible at the time. And that is something that not a lot of people think very thoroughly about. And then know what your reporting mechanisms are, not just for those independent, organizations that are doing your social media platform hosting, but know who you can report this to in your community. Do you have a cybercrime task force that's available for your police department if you live in maybe a larger area like New York City, or do you need to report through like a local police department and things like that? And then again, strong passwords. Length makes strength for passwords, guys. The longer your password is and the more complicated it is, the less likely it is to be breached. It doesn't matter if it's, I like kittens a lot, but if it's all lowercase, you are far more likely to have that password be violated and not be accessible, or sorry, be accessible to other individuals, and then they can get access to your accounts. So remember, in our world today, your personal information is the key to you staying safe, you keeping that private information secured. So it's more than just like a best practice, right? We have to do this in order to protect ourselves, especially with how widespread a lot of these activities have gotten. So stay safe online, stay aware of what's going on, and try to make sure that your online presence is not leading to risks either in the digital space or worse, offline in the real world. So we said we'd share some additional resources. I'm actually going to take these and post them in the chat because I was like, yeah, this makes sense to put it on a slide, but some of those links are really, really long. So that's going to be the first thing I drop in the chat for you guys here. And hopefully you, it looks like it's going to paste in clear. So, oh, okay, there we go. So we've got all of these links here, and then I've got my contact information as well. We're going to have stuff through NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and through ICAC, which are going to be really more focused on identifying ways to help protect children. CISA has great stuff again for protecting children if you're a parent or if you're an educator. There's a report from CNN that's very detailed and talks about doxing, which is a really great resource. If you are a parent or if you deal with children or if you're just interested in generally keeping children safe, I cannot recommend enough the Deutsche Telekom video Without Consent. It is a video that highlights the way that AI is used to take images and likenesses of children, make them into fake videos, fake exploitation videos, and target children. It's a very powerful video. It helps talk about how you should, if you have children, think really critically about what you are posting about those kids online. Give them control over their own digital footprint. It's the thing that everybody does. You want to post pictures of your kids and share that. If you're going to do that, do it safely. Make sure that those pictures and those images are protected and limited. And that's a really, really great video that just highlights some of the kind of danger and how scary that really is. If you have an example to add there, Harry, please add it. We're happy to do that. And then there's some more things here on cyber stalking and sextortion. At this point, I have talked for probably far too long, so I'm going to throw up my contact us page. Reach out at the OSINT Foundation if you have any questions. Our contact information is also in the chat, and I'm going to turn it back to Denise.
Awesome. This was amazing information, huh, guys? After we did our little practice run through yesterday, I immediately went into my privacy settings of Facebook and I was like, what is going on here? Of course, they don't make it easy, but definitely would recommend looking at it. So here's our information. Again, I'm part of the company partnership program, and I'm one of the 2 managers that we have in existence right now. And I just pasted both of our emails addresses again in the chat. But now the exciting part, so now we get to the Q&A session, and there were a couple of you that already wrote questions in the chat. So I'm going to read those ones now since you guys beat everyone to the punch, and I'll have Jessica answer those for you. So Stephanie said, if your computer has been locked and you have more than one computer, can you simply log into your other computer, or does this affect the account and not the actual laptop?
So Stephanie, I think I saw that come in when we were talking about ransomware. So if your computer individually has been hit with a ransomware attack and you have more than one computer, I would say that it's very likely that you can log into your other computer without issue. But if your laptops are both on the same Wi-Fi connection, if they're on the same network, depending on what type of ransomware attack or what type of incident you're undergoing, it's possible that it is on your entire network. So the best practice there would be to put your other device that is not currently affected into airplane mode, and make sure it's disconnected from your network before you turn it back on. There are also agencies and organizations that can help you try to get that computer recovered. So if you store everything in the cloud and your computer that is connected to your cloud account is going through a ransomware attack and you're like, I don't care if I lose the data on this because I know it's somewhere else, you can, I would say keep the other computer disconnected from the internet, wipe the first computer that is undergoing the attack or is being targeted for that attack. And then once that is wiped, you can restart it, make sure that it looks clean. I would maybe wipe it twice just to be safe, turn it back on, and then I would say you're probably safe to check and see if the network is looking okay on that laptop. I would leave the other one disconnected until you can verify that there's nothing weird going on your actual network at home.
Awesome. And then who do you report internet stalking to? What's her other question?
Oh, great question. So that is going to depend on kind of where you live. Again, a lot of the stuff is the jurisdictions for online and internet crimes are really hard to determine. So if you live in New York City, report it to your police department. If you live in Austin, Texas, report it to your local police department. At a minimum, if they're not the appropriate person, they will be able to give you direction to the next organization that you should be reporting that to. And because that is going to come down to a lot of like just different jurisdictional things. If you're in an area where maybe dealing with a lot of cyber crimes and they do have a separate task force, they may direct you to them. But I would always start with your local police and law enforcement organizations, because if that internet stalking does turn into physical stalking, that's still who you would go to, and presumably your local, um, courts and things like that to get protective orders and things of that nature. So that would be my best recommendation.
Right. And earlier we're talking about some protective apps. So Hari is asking, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. What are the protective apps again that you mentioned?
Oh, yes. The ones that we were talking about for children. Let me go ahead and copy them out for my notes. So if you are trying to keep an eye on what your children are doing online to keep them safe, there are things like KidGuard, MSpy, and Spizy. Now, as somebody that does not have children, and this article was an older article, but these are the three that were mentioned. That was in 2018. They mentioned those. I don't know if those are still up and still accessible. But what I can say is that I would guarantee that NCMEC and ICAC and a lot of these other resources here that are focused on protecting children will be able to give you really great additional resources of things that are current in this environment.
Awesome. Vicky's asking, is there a foolproof way to close malicious pop-ups? Powering off with button and restarting brought the pop-up back when it happened to my mom.
Yeah, so if you have a malicious pop-up ad and you're sure that it's just a pop-up ad, what's happening is that that is likely stored in the cache or the cookies in your internet browser. So in order to get rid of that, you would go into the browser and actually, I would just clear your cache, your history, your cookies, clear everything that's stored in that browser locally, and that should remove that. That is actually something that I had. It was one of the I teach an online, an open source intelligence training course at a nonprofit organization called IASIS, for law enforcement officers, government, military, folks of that nature. And it was the fastest I've ever seen this happen. We had folks turn on their computers and navigate to a website that we've tested, we know it's clean. And within 2 minutes, I heard a fake ransomware attack coming from an older gentleman's computer. And that's what it was. It was just a malicious pop-up ad. It stuck in his cache and his cookies. He was panicking, but all we had to do was clear that out. And we did, turn the computer off and turn it back on again, just to kind of make sure that took and cleared everything out. And that did resolve that issue. So that's also just a great security practice, to clear your history, clear your cache, clear your cookies as you're kind of undergoing, random things on the internet. You don't want 5 years of internet history sitting in your computer.
That is a great question, actually, because I just cleared my history and hate to admit, but didn't know how to clear the cache. So I actually Googled it and followed the instructions.
Yes, it is.
So
It
if
is
you guys
amazing.
don't
So
know how to do it, it'll give you instructions.
yeah, that's great, Hari. So you can do it. You can do it like that for your temporary folders on Windows if you're getting more into the actual manual mode there, or you can just do it through your browser. And if you ever don't know how to do it, Google it. It works. If you're using ChatGPT, which is like the coolest thing that's ever happened, I think, in my opinion at least, that can also walk you through really great security for how to clear out your browser stuff. It's fascinating, just how advanced that information is.
Yeah, that's awesome. Carolyn was asking, please share with us which password manager you have success with.
Sure. I've used Passware. I know there's a couple others that people are very big fans of, and of course, now that I'm on the spot, I'm forgetting what the name is. LastPass. Yes, LastPass is another good one. I believe maybe LastPass was the one that within the last year did have a data breach, but it did not breach the user's passwords. It just breached like initial login information, and that could be a different organization. I may be getting that incorrect, but I like Passware. It's very popular. There's a lot of them out there. There are free ones, and something I'll say about free versus paid services. If something is free on the internet, it is likely because you are the product. If something is free, it's because they may be collecting and using that information that they're gathering from you to kind of exploit elsewhere, whether that's just to sell, to maybe advertising aggregators, or to do something a little bit more nefarious with. So for services that are protecting your identity and protecting your information and things like passwords, that is an instance where it is worth using a paid resource. Susan, I see the question about Bitwarden. I personally am not familiar with that one, so I would just do some background research on it. One of the great ways you can do that is check the Better Business Bureau for them as an organization and see if they've had a lot of complaints, if there's anything suspicious there. But largely, if it's something that's rated very high, if it's I wouldn't look at like advertising through Google, but because those are just paid advertisements. But I would look at some objective um, reviews of people that are just using it to test it, like technology reviewers that are not being paid to highlight that. It was LastPass. Thank you, Kenny. They were very slow to alert their users to the breach, but it and KeepPass both offer a free version that will not sync with your computer if it's free. They work the same and the screens look very similar. Awesome. This is great. I love
Very
looking
cool.
at some very experienced folks in the crowd here.
Yeah, it sure seems like it. Did you guys really need to be on this today? You seem to know a lot. Then I have another question from, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Lydia. Is there an easy way to request to have a user account and data be deleted for sites I am no longer using? Companies don't seem to have an easy way to make these requests. I haven't never seen that either, so.
So an easy way, I would say no, right? The goal of every organization is to make sure that you are staying engaged with them. They want to make sure that they're, continuing to kind of collect your information and things like that. So it is not necessarily easy, but they do all have different, very specific processes for removing your content. If you know that you have an account and you have not used it in a long time, check and see if you can even log into it. There are certain organizations that deal with personal data that will delete accounts after inactivity, but it's like 5 years. So there's a good chance that they're not automatically deleting it. If you do have the ability to get back in and recover that account, you should be able to look and either look through a help desk or look through, an FAQ section on how to delete that account and delete all of your information. Unfortunately, that does tend to be a one-by-one situation. There's not like an easy way to blast that out and get all of that data removed at the same time. There are services that say that they do that, but you are then giving your information and your passwords and
Mhm.
access to that system to that third party, and that can be even more dangerous for you. Um, I will say that I do this. I have work. So through Pangea Research, we do some work with clients to help them remove some of this data. If there's a specific site you want to talk about, feel free to reach out to me afterwards and we can talk about the process for getting that information removed.
Awesome. I have a couple more questions here.
Sure.
Actually, just, well, yeah, I guess it is a question. I think there's a password tool on your iPhone to store all of your passwords. Would you recommend that?
So I'll give you the best case scenario answer, and then I'll give you my answer with what I actually do. So a lot of people say not to use those because, if you lose your phone or it's not secure, right, then all of your passwords are potentially accessible to a nefarious actor. I will call out if you guys saw I'm sure everybody saw the Boeing airplane incident last week where the door blew out. If any of you looked at some of the follow-ups to that, somebody actually found an iPhone that was sucked out of that plane, tangled up in a tree over where it was released, over where it fell out of the door. If there's anybody in the chat that knows that incident, you know what I'm talking about. There was one big problem that I noticed as soon as I saw the person that, had taken the picture of this phone and reported it. And that was that the phone was unlocked. It was still open to the screen where somebody was tracking their baggage. That means that that person either did not have a password on their phone at all, or they had set it to never turn off and never actually lock without being manually locked. So instances like that, your password tool isn't doing a whole lot for you if you have access to that phone. I personally do, I have an iPhone. I think it's very secure. I use iPhones and Apple products because of their security. They are very, very good with what they do. And it's very tough to get into a Mac or an Apple device if you don't have a password. So if you're protecting it safely, I would go ahead and use it. I personally do. It has not been a problem for me, but keep in mind that with everything you do, everything you store online, there is a risk for that. You also may be
Okay.
storing your information in the cloud because there is an option to keep your password stored in that Apple Cloud environment. So if that cloud environment gets breached, you may lose access to those passwords as well, or someone else may get access to those passwords. And then I
All
see Alicia's question about auto-generated passwords from a password protector. Those are great choices to get really good examples of what complex passwords look like. I will say yes and no, right? There's risk to everything. Um, we can't guarantee that the password it recommends to you, that it doesn't also recommend that password to 7 other people. And reused passwords are one of the biggest problems in this space of protecting yourself. So consider using it, but also consider maybe take that password and add a couple extra characters to the end. change it up a little bit, make it a little bit different, because there's a possibility that with the way they process those things and create them algorithmically, that it may be repeated somewhere for another individual at another time.
Gotcha. Good information. And this is the first time that I've gone to almost an hour. So this was really,
Sorry,
really good
I
information.
talk
No,
a
no, no.
lot.
This is awesome. Great questions. Love, love, love the interaction. So now is time for our raffle questions. So drum roll, please. So the question is very short, but hopefully you paid attention to the very slide where I mentioned in the chat, so please pay attention here. The question is, what is doxing? And the first person to answer the question correctly in the chat will be the winner of our beautiful $25 Visa gift card. Let me scroll down. What do you think about the answer from Kenny? I think that one's good, right?
Yeah, so I would say Kenny Johnson, nice job. That is
Kenny, you got it.
correct to me.
All right,
And then
Kenny,
Robert
I
and
have your
Stacy, also, you guys got it. That's
also
fantastic. You're
correct.
just a little
Yep.
bit slower on the typing, so nice job, guys.
Kenny, and I wish I had one of those cowbells. Congratulations on winning. I have your email from your registration, so I will be reaching out to you. And thank you guys so much. Thank you, Jessica. This was awesome. We appreciate you coming on board here and giving us all this amazing information. I know I was floored yesterday when I heard your presentation for the first time. So we thank you, and thank you everyone else for joining us today. We hope that you enjoyed the information. I will be sending out the link to the recording for this. I will also send out, as somebody requested, the slides with all of the resources. And of course, here you also have Jessica's email address. And mine was also earlier in the chat if you have any questions for me, and you'll also see it from the registrations. Please feel free to reach out. This is important information, important topic. Have a great rest of your day and stay safe out there, guys.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Appreciate your attendance. Again, this was high level, very broad. Please reach out with any questions. I love doing this, and I'm so happy to talk to you guys. So thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and jump off. And Denise, we can catch up after this.
Sounds good. Bye, everyone.
Awesome. Bye, everyone.